Thank you and welcome. Again, my name's John Sandt. You might see it on the screen. I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and may seem like an idiotic title. Uh, what came first, the chicken or the egg, for a biblical teaching? But if you'll go to Proverbs 8:22, I'll try to explain that further. And my answer is a better question is what came before the chicken and the egg? Proverbs 8:22 starts out, Yahweh created me at the beginning of his work, prior to his deeds of long ago. From antiquity, I was established from the start, from before the earth. I was born when there were no deep oceans, when there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills were formed. I was born. When he had not yet made the earth and the fields, or the initial dust of the world, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he described the horizon above the face of the deep, when he fixed the clouds above, when he strengthened the springs of the deep, when he set for the sea its limits so waters would not disobey his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, when then I was beside him, growing up, and I was his great delight, daily playing in his presence at every moment, playing in the world, his earth, and full of delight with humankind. Okay, well, let's go back to verse 22. Who is the me? Well, the answer to that is a little bit further back in the chapter, Proverbs 8:12. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of Yahweh is to hate evil, pride and arrogance in the path of evil, and a perverse mouth I hate. I possess counsel and sound advice. I have understanding. I possess strength. By me kings reign, and by me rulers decree righteousness. By me rulers govern, even nobles, who are judge who all who judge with righteousness. I love those who love me, and those who desire me will find me. Riches and glory are with me, enduring prosperity and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even better than refined gold, and my gain is better than silver. I walk in the ways of righteousness, in the midst of the paths of justice, to cause those who love me to inherit property, and I will fill their storehouses. So we see wisdom was created at the beginning before the chicken or the egg. Going to head over to chapter 9, the very next chapter. And today, basically, what we're going to look at is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and how they relate to each other. Proverbs 9:10 says, The fear of Yahweh is the starting point of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is the starting point of understanding. So here we have all three: wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. The starting point is mentioned two times. So in my mind, if you're an atheist or you ignore God, then you're more than clueless. You're not even at the starting point because you have no wisdom or knowledge, or like I said, you ignore the possibility of God's existence. I went to the fabulously fun fellowship in Florida 2 months ago, and while I was there, I stayed at my cousin's house. While I was there, I was able to connect with an old workmate. We worked together 40 years ago. We hadn't seen each other in over 30 years. And he only lived an hour away. So we met for lunch. And I told him why I was there. And we discussed things. He says, I don't know if you know this, John. By the way, his name is John too, but we'll call him John Doe. He said, I don't know if you know this, John, but I've been pretty much an atheist most of my life. And he said, but I had an epiphany a couple of years ago, and I'm going to Bible studies and stuff. And I just thought that was fabulous. He's a guy who uh, left the radio station that I worked with him at, and he went to a larger market, became the news director of 50,000 watt AM radio station, which is pretty powerful, and then became the governor's press secretary in that state. So he was not, a raging idiot by any means. He was intelligent, had a decent personality. But it's finally, after about 70 years of living in our natural world, he came to a deeper knowledge of the truth, and he's still going into the knowledge of the truth. But he had an epiphany, and I don't think that was anything that the world sparked in him. That was through prayer and other people speaking into his life. I just talked to him Thursday, and I asked him, "So do you consider yourself a Christian, John?" He said, "I'm almost there. I can't say that I've committed myself to Jesus Christ or anything. And so I went over a few things, introduced him to the REV, but uh, the reason for that story is that you can be intelligent, but just totally miss the gospel, totally miss the good news of Jesus Christ and the greatness of God and everything that he's created. Uh, in the natural realm, in the physical realm, uh, I'll talk about electricity a little bit. If you don't know much about it, it's very wise to stay away from it. I have my cousin's husband, who was a longtime friend. This is years ago. His brother-in-law had rewired the pump for their pool, and he needed to install a breaker, but he was hesitant to. And I just happened to be the sure because I know a little bit about electricity, but he didn't. And also part of my job in radio from time to time was doing engineering work, which required dealing with large transmitters, which have these large capacitors and they hold an electric charge. Even if you turn the power to the transmitter off, they still hold a charge. So you need to be wise enough to go in there and ground them. There's a thing called a grounding stick. It's about 18, 24 inches long, and it has a metal hook on the end connected to a wire, which goes to ground. And you touch the ends of the capacitors, and there'll be a spark, and then it goes to ground. And now that capacitor is safe if you need to clean around it. The reason I'm telling that story is in the industry, that grounding stick is known and referred to as the Jesus stick because it's shaped as a J. And obviously, if you don't use the Jesus stick, uh, you're in trouble. You need them. So, so that's a little bit about that. And I'll tell you a quick story. I have two great nephews, three, and the other one was one yesterday. His party is actually later this afternoon. And now they're just young. They have very little knowledge, wisdom, or understanding. They know that they like bananas, and they know that they hate poison ivy, but they have no idea where they come from. They both come from the ground. Now, the 3-year-old might have an idea that mom gets them at the store, but that's the extent of when you're young, you just don't have knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Uh, we're going to head to the last verse in the book of Romans, which is Romans 16:27. And we'll touch on several verses regarding wisdom. Romans 16:27 reads, "To the only wise God be the glory forever through Jesus Christ. Amen." And that just always jumps out at me. The only wise God, meaning, well, there's other gods. People have money as their God. People have drugs as their God. There's so many different quote unquote gods, but the only wise God is the Father of Jesus Christ. Uh, Proverbs 11:9. You don't have to go there. I'll just read them. I'm reading all these from the REV. Proverbs 11:9. The godless person ruins his neighbor with his mouth, but the righteous will be delivered by knowledge. Now, if you look at the REV commentary for this verse, it explains that to have knowledge in that culture meant that you acted on it, not just know it. We'll get into that a little bit later too. Couple of verses ahead, Proverbs 11:14. Without wise guidance, people will fall, but with a multitude of advisors, there is deliverance. And it makes so much sense. If you're not exactly sure of something, you call a friend, you ask a friend. I've done that. I'm sure we've all kind of done that. And basically, that's why we prefer to have committees, boards of directors, uh, a Senate, a House, groups to make decisions rather than one individual, uh, to ensure that there's balance and some collaboration in the decisions that are going to be made. Because you never know, you might get a King David, which would be great, but you might get a King Saul, which maybe isn't so great. Proverbs 16:22 says, "Good judgment is a fountain of life for its owner, but The teaching of fools is foolishness. Uh, in observing, if people observe and pay attention in life, they usually have a little bit of knowledge, whether they acknowledge God or not. You learn as you grow, uh, but you learn a lot more, especially if you're submitted to God. So, true wisdom, God's wisdom, is being open to the truth. That's why seeking truth is wise. Now, good judgment in that verse is the result of good knowledge, good wisdom, and good understanding. Now, the verse also just spoke to us about the opposite of wisdom, which is fools and foolishness. Now, in an episode of The Three Stooges, which are old slapstick comedians from the 30s and 40s, they made short films. The one I'm referring to is Saved by the Bell. And during this episode, I don't know if it was a landlord or somebody uh, they were trying to collect money from the Three Stooges, and one says, I'll go in. I'll go in and get it." He says, "No, no, no, I'll get it. What exactly? What kind of fool do you take me for?" And Curly, the clown of the Stooges, says, "Why? Is there more than one kind?" Which is, ha ha, that's kind of funny. But according to the Hebrew Bible, which is our Old Testament, there's five kinds of fools, five different words that can and are translated as fool or a type of a fool. Now, when I decided to put this in here, I thought the ironic part of this is the Three Stooges were all Jewish. So they may have been somewhat familiar with the Old Testament. Anyway, uh, if you're reading from the REV, you can check the commentary on Proverbs 16:12, and you'll see a short explanation of a lot of different Hebrew words meaning fool. And there's also an STF six-part series on YouTube that Dan Gallagher did several years back. It's called The Wise, the Fool, and the Wicked, which is also very informative. I'll quickly go through the five types of fools. First there is the naive fool. They're just inexperienced, just like my great nephews. They just don't know. And there's certainly no sin in that. I didn't know a lot of stuff when I was a kid. I still don't know a lot of stuff, probably. And the verbs that relate to the verses that relate to that, Proverbs 7:7. And I saw among the naive, and I discerned among the youths a young man lacking sense. That's that word. It's pithe. Uh, Psalm 19:7. God's law is perfect, restoring the soul. Yahweh's testimony is sure, making wise the simple. And you may have heard the term, he's a simpleton. I haven't heard it lately, but when I was younger, I did. And that word simple is fool, same word. The second fool is referred to as an unreasonable fool. And that kind of falls into the categories of like teens and young adults sometimes, not everybody, and only in some areas sometimes. Proverbs 15:14, the heart of the one who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouth of fools feeds on foolishness. And Proverbs 15:5, a fool spurns discipline from his father, but the one who heeds reproof acts prudently. And I looked this up online. Some attribute this quote to Mark Twain, others not. But I remember hearing this years ago, and I always got a kick out of it. And I think it's applies here. When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I couldn't hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years. Now, if you want to look for maybe a more modern example, uh, watch the 1974 movie Animal House. It's full of this kind of foolishness where they think they know everything, and uh, there's nothing to be gained by listening to others. The third is the stubborn fool, and it's the fool that's mentioned most in the Bible. Proverbs 13:16 reads, "Every prudent person acts with knowledge, but a fool displays foolishness." And who wants to look like a fool, you know? Proverbs 122, how long, O naive ones, will you have naivety? How long will mockers delight in mocking and fools hate knowledge? This is the type of people, the type of fool that just can never quite admit that they're wrong about anything. The fourth is a mocking fool. Do not reprove a mocker, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. The presumptuousness and proud person, mocker is his name. This is Proverbs 21:24. Sorry. The presumptuous and proud person, mocker is his name, acts with arrogant presumptuousness. Again, they can't admit they're wrong. And on top of that, they mock others for being right most of the time. And the fifth and worst type of fool is a committed or godless fool. And the Hebrew word is nabal. Psalm 14:1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Well, I think we've all heard that particular verse before and agree with it. Ezekiel 13:3, this is what the Lord Yahweh says. Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirits and have seen nothing. Making up what's in their own mind and heart uh, and presenting that as prophecy from Yahweh, from God. That Nabal is the worst and most destructive of all fools, working against God, and all that's good. And perhaps they're even called sometimes sons of Belial. Uh, and if that sounds familiar, Nabal, it was the name of a man who died because of his foolishness. And later, David married his widow, Abigail. And you can read that record in 1 Samuel 25. Now, there's a thing known as cognitive dissonance, and according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is a psychological conflict resulting from simultaneously holding incongruous beliefs and attitudes, as a fondness for smoking and a belief that it's harmful. Or in my case, I'm a type 2 diabetic, so I should watch the carbs that I eat. But I had some cheesecake last night at a get together. So it's one of those things that is kind of strange where people accept it, even though they know it's really not correct. Uh, Go to Romans chapter 7, please. There's two signs of cognitive dissonance that I've uncovered or found: justification or realization of behavior and doing something out of social pressure, not true interest. Now, you might ask, is there any example of cognitive dissonance in the Bible? Well, Romans 7, we're going to start at verse 14. And this is Paul. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am the flesh, having been sold into slavery under the power of sin. For I do not understand my own actions, for I am not practicing what I truly want, but I am doing the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, truly want to do, I agree with the law that it is good. So now I myself am no longer the one who is doing it, but it is the sin that lives in me. For I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my flesh. For the desire to do good, to do what is good, is present in me, but the ability to do it is not. For I do not do the good that I truly want to do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. Now, if I do what I do not truly want to do, it is no longer I myself who acts this way, but it is the sin that lives in me. And so Paul, even the Apostle Paul, wasn't immune to this thing called cognitive dissonance. It's interesting study on how the mind works. There's a traditional story, and there's many versions of it. Stories about Augustine. And according to Caxton's 1483 edition of the Golden Legend, St. Augustine spent 30 years writing his book De Trinitate, about the Holy Trinity. During that time, Augustine was once walking along the beach, struggling to understand how God could be three persons in one God. He met a child who was using a seashell to scoop water from the sea. The child would run back to the beach and pour the water into a small hole he had dug in the sand. Augustine watched for a while. Then he asked the child what he was doing. He says, "Well, I'm putting the sea into this hole." "But that's impossible," Augustine cried. "The hole is not big enough to contain the entire sea." The boy stopped for a moment, stood, and looked into the eyes of the saint, and replied, It's no more impossible than what you're trying to do. Comprehend the immensity of the mystery of the Holy Trinity with your small intelligence. Augustine turned away in amazement, and when he looked back, the child had disappeared. Augustine then understood that no mortal man can understand the Trinity because it's a mystery which only God can comprehend. God used this child, thought by some to be an angel, some to be the Christ child himself, to teach him this valuable lesson. And because of this, the seashell became a symbol for St. Augustine, father and doctor of the church. Uh, cognitive dissonance holds on to a belief with no evidence and ignores logical thinking, often using this explanation uh, that, oh, it's a mystery that only God can understand. All right, back to wisdom. Proverbs 16:16. How much better to get wisdom than gold? And to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. Buying gold today can be a good investment but at what cost? If you have the money to invest, hey, that's great. But if you're using different methods to get the money to invest, like going to the casino, buying lottery tickets, and so forth, well, basically, that's a fool's dream. And I can readily admit I bought a lottery ticket or two in my life. Gold in this verse means wealth. And if you don't have wealth, it's extremely doubtful that spinning a wheel, pulling a one-armed bandit, or picking out a set of numbers is going to get you there. Besides, God says that we should work for the things we want and need, not gamble. And who do we have to blame for this? Go to Genesis chapter 2, please. We're looking at who to blame for work. And your first reaction might be, well, Adam, right? Well, no. Genesis 2:2. God is the first entity that is said to have worked. By the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. Then later, God put Adam to work. Uh, Genesis 2:15. Yahweh God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to work it and to care for it. It's simple. We were created, man was created to work. Uh, it's something that God wants us to do. This is something that he does himself. It kind of reminds me of an old boss of mine that I really liked, and so did the guys that worked for him. He never asked us to do anything that he wouldn't do. So we considered him a really decent guy. And he was. Ecclesiastes 5:12 says, the sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much. But the abundance of the wealthy person will not allow him to sleep. And that's the irony of wealth. Once you have wealth, then you're worried about losing it. Not everyone. There's some righteous, godly people who have obtained wealth and they know how to handle wealth and they use it to help people. But by and large, the people who get very wealthy become concerned about losing their wealth or their prestige. Proverbs 17:24. You don't have to go to these because I'm rattling a few of them off rather quickly. Wisdom is with the one who understands, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. And then Proverbs 17:27 and 28. The one who holds back his words has attained knowledge, and the one who has a cool spirit is a person of understanding. Even a fool who remains silent is thought to be wise. When he shuts his lips, he is considered to be discerning. And there's an idiom in the English language that I heard my father repeat several times. Better to remain silent and be thought of a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Kind of a modern idiom in our culture. Uh, Sometimes things can appear on the outside to be insightful, intelligent, and even wise, but then you have to double check and consider. Here's a quote from Gone with the Wind, written by Margaret Mitchell. Now you are beginning to think for yourself instead of letting others think for you. That's the beginning of wisdom. Oh, really? Well, it's true that we ought to think for ourselves, but remember Jeremiah 17:9? The heart is deceitful above all things, and it's incurable. Who can know it? And the heart Well, that's where our thinking takes place, and that's where our beliefs are held. So once again, Proverbs 9:10, the fear of Yahweh is the starting point of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is the starting point of understanding. So who do we believe? Margaret Mitchell or God? Well, Margaret Mitchell can be correct. We should think for ourselves, but only as long as our thoughts and actions align with God's words. In other words, God's thinking. Go to Genesis 6, please. So far, we've looked at worldly, human, and natural knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And now we're going to take a look at knowledge, wisdom, and understanding in the spiritual realm, which sometimes works a little bit different, as most of us probably know. Noah built the ark when God told him to, but he also gave him some understanding and actually explained why. It's in 3 short verses, Genesis 6:13 through 15. God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make an ark of gopher wood. You are to make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. And this is how you are to make it. And then he goes on with the instructions. So God told Noah what to do, how to do it, and why he wanted it done. That's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. All in 3 verses. In the spiritual world, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding are not always present. Now, the RV commentaries on 1 Corinthians 12 go into deeper detail on this, explaining the message of knowledge and the message of wisdom, which are revelation manifestations. Sometimes God or Jesus gives us both, and sometimes only one message, and sometimes none. For instance, you might be in the market or you might need a newer car. Yeah, that's me. My car's 20 years old, 223,000 miles on it, and my mechanic says, sorry, John, it's not going to pass inspection at the end of July. So guess what? I'm in that category. I'm in the market for a car. So you check out a particular vehicle you like and ask God if you should buy it. There's nothing wrong with that. He may respond. He may not respond, sorry, which means it's up to you. Or he may say yes. He may say, go ahead and buy it. He may say, no, don't buy that one. If you're trusting God, you act on his message of wisdom. No knowledge or understanding is really involved, only wisdom on what to do if you're asking God in the spiritual realm. Now, this sounds, well, this is great. When I first found out about this, oh, this is great. Oh, great. Well, God and Jesus will not answer every request and every question we have. For instance, unless there's an unusual situation, you won't get any revelation about what to have for lunch, when to take your shower, or walk your dog. I mean, God expects us to use our minds and figure these things out for ourselves in our normal day-to-day activities. And you think about it, if God did answer every question we have, there'd be no need to teach anything about knowledge, wisdom, or understanding. Any and every thought or idea in the entire book of Proverbs would be a moot point, pretty much irrelevant. Ever wonder why a message of knowledge and a message of wisdom are mentioned in 1 Corinthians 12, but there's no mention of a message of understanding? Once you have a message of knowledge and or a message of wisdom, you'll get the understanding. Understanding is the result of knowledge and wisdom. While we're in Genesis, go to chapter 41, please. I'm going to go over the record of Joseph and Pharaoh. Genesis 41, starting at 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Now he's responding to a dream that Pharaoh had. I think most of us know the story. The dream of Pharaoh is one. It's what God is about to do, he has declared to Pharaoh. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. The dream is one. The 7 thin and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and likewise the 7 empty heads of grain scorched by the east wind. There will be 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he has shown to Pharaoh. Behold, 7 years of great plenty are coming throughout all the land of Egypt, but there will arise 7 years of famine after them, and all the plenty of the land of Egypt will be forgotten. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land because of that famine that follows, for it will be very severe. The dream was doubled to Pharaoh because the matter is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Wow, this is all prophetic knowledge about what's coming down in the future, what's going to happen, and it seems pretty scary. So, what do we do? Is there any wisdom here? Starting in verse 33. So now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and let him appoint overseers over the land and collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. Let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the hand of Pharaoh for food in the cities and keep it under guard. The food will be held in reserve for the land for 7 years of famine that will be in the land in Egypt, so that the land does not perish because of the famine. The advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find someone like this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh then said to Joseph, "Because God has made all of this known to you, there's no one as discerning and wise as you. You will be over my house, and by your command, all my people will be ruled. Only in respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So now we have the message of wisdom from Joseph, which resulted in understanding the situation. The knowledge and the wisdom came to Joseph through God. In 1 Kings 20, we're going to read a story about a king. His name is Hezekiah. First, excuse me, 2 Kings 20. Hope I said 2 Kings originally. 2 Kings 20, verse 1. In those days, Hezekiah was sick to the point of death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came to him and said to him, "This is what Yahweh says: Set your house in order, for you are going to die and will not live." Wow. Wisdom is set your house in order, and the knowledge is why you're going to die. And I couldn't help but think about this section in this sharing when Lanchichos prophesies that there is a tenderness and softness in my voice. I'm sure God didn't want that to happen. He doesn't love the death of anyone, of any of his believers. But anyway, that was the prophecy. Then he, Hezekiah, turned his face to the wall and prayed to Yahweh, saying, "Please, Yahweh, remember now how I have walked before you in truth and with a wholly devoted heart, and have done what is good in your eyes." And Hezekiah wept, and it was a great weeping. Now Isaiah had not yet gone out into the middle court of the palace, when the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, "Turn back and tell Hezekiah, the leader of my people, this is what Yahweh says. The God of David your father says, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Behold, I will heal you. On the third day you will go up to the house of Yahweh. I will add 15 years to your days. I will rescue you and this city from out of the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David's sake." Isaiah said, "Take a cake of pressed figs." Well, there's your wisdom what to do. They took it and laid it on the boil, and he lived. And Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "What is the sign that Yahweh will heal me and that I will go up to the house of Yahweh on the third day?" Now, I have to frankly admit, this section is a little bit perplexing. Hezekiah believed the prophet Isaiah when he said, by message of knowledge, you're going to die. So why would he not believe the prophecy when he comes back, probably just a few minutes later? You're going to live 15 more years. And now he wants a sign. And as we read the rest of it, just I just think how accommodating is God to human beings in general, and certainly to us as his children. So I'm in verse 9 now. Isaiah said, "This is the sign to you from Yahweh, that Yahweh will do the thing that he has spoken. Should the shadow go forward 10 steps or go back 10 steps?" In other words, the sun moving and altering actual time, because we'll see at the end of the verse that it relates to a sundial. Hezekiah answered, "Oh, it's an easy thing for the shadow to lengthen 10 steps, but let the shadow return backwards 10 steps." So Isaiah, the prophet, cried out to Yahweh, and he brought the shadow on the sundial back 10 steps that it had gone down on the sundial of Hazaz. Uh, like I said, God is so accommodating to people sometimes. And reading this, this is just me. Almost seems like there's a joke in here somewhere. Like first he's going to die, and then time moves back, and it's kind of like you say this guy's going to be late for his own funeral. But I still got to think about that one. We're going to wrap this up in 2 Timothy. The facts are known, that's knowledge, are presented. Then what to do, how to act, that's the wisdom, that's applied, and the result is understanding. 2 Timothy chapter 1. Uh, Oh, I don't have the chapter here. I'm sorry. Well, I'll have to get it for you then. But know this, that in the last days difficult times will come, for people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, without natural affection, unwilling to be reconciled to others, slanderers, without self control, brutal, not interested in doing what is good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Turn away from such people, for among them are those with false pretenses who slip into homes and capture the attention of weak willed women who are weighed down with sins and led along by various passions, who are always learning but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. And that last line is what I wanted to get to. So let's not be fools of any kind, but let's do the opposite. Let's be always be learning and always pursuing the knowledge and wisdom of God's truth.